I was 17 when my father pawned his wedding ring. He said it was just temporary, that he'd buy it back next month. But deep down, I think we both knew it wasn't coming back. My name's Daniel Reyes, 29 now, software engineer, self-made success, as my LinkedIn profile says. But if you scroll far enough down my memory, you'll find a man who sold the last piece of gold he owned so I could chase my dreams. We weren't poor, just the kind of poor where every month was a puzzle. Which bill to pay, which meal to skip, which excuse to give the landlord. Dad worked at a garage. Mom stitched clothes from home. And me, I dreamed of being a programmer, building something that mattered. Back then, computers were a luxury we couldn't afford. So I'd sneak into the internet cafe down the street, pretending to do homework, while I actually watched coding tutorials on cracked headphones. Every time I came home late, Dad would shake his head. "Someday you'll build one of those things yourself," he'd say. I laughed it off. "Yeah, sure, Dad." "With what money?" He just smiled. That quiet kind of smile parents wear when they already have a plan they can't afford. A week later on my birthday, he handed me a box. Inside was an old laptop. Dented, slow, second-hand. But it was mine. I didn't ask where it came from. I didn't notice his bare finger. Not until much later that night, when Mom whispered, "He sold his ring, Daniel." Said education shines brighter than gold, I pretended not to cry. But I did. And I promised myself, one day I'd make it worth it. That laptop was everything to me. It was old, loud, and would overheat if I ran more than 2 tabs at once. But it was freedom. It was the first time I felt like the future was something I could touch. I spent nights teaching myself code from YouTube videos that buffered every 2 minutes. HTML, C++, Python. I didn't even understand half of it at first, but I kept going. Dad would peek into my room sometimes, leaning on the door frame with his grease-stained hands, smiling like he was watching a miracle. "Don't stay up too late, genius," he'd say. I'd grin back. "Geniuses don't sleep, Dad." He'd laugh. That deep, honest laugh that used to fill our little house with warmth. But sometimes I'd catch him staring at Mom's hand, the one still wearing her ring. His thumb would trace the empty spot on his own finger before he'd quickly shove his hands in his pockets. Mom noticed it too. She tried to convince him to buy it back. "They'll still have it at the shop," she said. He shook his head. That ring already did its job. A few months later, I built my first real project, a small web app that helped local shops track inventory. I showed Dad one night, proud as ever. "Look, it actually works." He stared at the screen like it was magic. Then he patted my shoulder and said, "You didn't just fix code today, son. You fixed our story." I didn't understand what he meant then. But I do now, because for the first time in his life, he didn't have to fix something broken. He built something through me. By the time I graduated, that same laptop had carried me through 4 years of assignments, a scholarship application, and my first internship offer from a tech firm in the city. The day I got the email, I remember running out of my room yelling, "Dad, I did it." He was under the old Toyota, fixing something, covered in oil. He rolled out, squinted at me, and said, "Did what?" "I got the job, Dad. Full-time, starting next month." He froze for a second, then his face broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I told your mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "I told her this kid's gonna change the family tree." But moving to the city, it changed things. At first, I called every night, then every week, then not at all. Work consumed me. Meetings, deadlines, people with expensive suits and fake smiles. I bought a car, the kind Dad would have called a waste of good money. But I told myself I was just busy building a future for all of us. Every month, Dad texted the same thing. "Proud of you, son." "Don't forget to eat," I'd reply with a thumbs-up emoji. One night, Mom called. "Your father pawned his tools," she said quietly. "Why?" "He says they're old." But I know better. He just wanted to help you with your apartment deposit. I promised I'd send the money back, but the next morning, I forgot. I told myself I'd call on Sunday. Sunday turned into next month. Next month turned into silence. Until the day Mom's name lit up my phone, not with a call, but a text. "Dad's in the hospital." I drove home that night faster than I ever had in my life. The city lights blurred behind me, replaced by the quiet emptiness of the town I'd spent years trying to escape. When I walked into that hospital room, I almost didn't recognize him. Dad looked smaller, like someone had drained the strength out of the man who once carried me on his shoulders through summer fairs and monsoon storms. His hands, those hands that built everything I'd ever depended on, were wrapped in ivy lines. He smiled the second he saw me. "Hey, champ," he whispered, weak but still trying to sound cheerful. I tried to speak, but the lump in my throat wouldn't let me. Mom stood quietly in the corner, her eyes swollen. "He's been asking about you every day," she said softly. Dad reached out, patted my hand, and said, "Did the new project go well?" That was him, dying, but still more concerned about me. I sat down beside him, tears falling faster than I could wipe them away. "Why didn't you tell me, Dad?" He chuckled, breath shallow. "You were busy living the life I wanted for you. That's all I ever needed." Then he did something that shattered me completely. He reached under his pillow and pulled out a folded pawn ticket, the one for his tools, and whispered, "I kept this to remind myself it was worth it." I broke, right there. I held his hand for hours, telling him every story I should have shared years ago, every thank you I never said, every apology I owed. He smiled through it all, eyes glassy but peaceful. And just before dawn, he looked at me and said, "Promise me something." "Anything, Dad." "Don't sell your time to people who won't remember your name. Give it to the ones who already love you." That was the last thing he ever said to me. Now, years later, that old laptop still sits on my desk, cracked, slow, missing keys. But I'll never replace it, because every time I open it, I remember the man who sold his wedding ring, just so I could type my way into a better life.